there any question from the audience? I would start with that, maybe, please, sir.
David Brigginshaw, International Railway Journal. How much public and political support is there for the Helsinki Tallinn Tunnel and the Arctic Railway project?
Could you kindly repeat?
How much political and public support is there for the Helsinki Tallinn Tunnel project and the Arctic Railway project?
Maybe.
Shall we start with Sabina and then
Maybe
Kari?
I think I'll start with this. I would say that it actually hasn't been measured yet, since there hasn't been made any official decisions to actually start the project yet. We're still pre-studying it, so therefore we haven't measured it. The government hasn't, for example, decided on it, or the parliament at any stage yet. So we're still pre-studying, and we know, of course, the media is extremely interested in these mega projects, of course, and we can see already that there are strong voices that are very much for the building of the tunnel, and there especially are the economic, the industry, and the business side, of course, is extremely interested in this, and they're lobbying it a lot. But we have, of course, then we have the environmental issues and that kind of stuff, that those are a little bit more hesitant on that. So I would say that we don't really know yet. We'll see.
Kari, you want to take this?
Yes, this was the study. Can we go on with our project, and it needs a lot of work in the future before we can start to build the tunnel. And next, we have the planning phases, which must go as the law are in Finland, and it takes many years' time.
Great. May I immediately follow up with a question on Slido, which is, how do you react to the competing tunnel initiative, which is high on media's agenda in Finland and involves Chinese funding? So again, both of you.
I can say to that it's under our umbrella. As I saw there, we have the idea of this global challenge for new ideas, and this is one of these ideas. There will be only one tunnel connection, not many.
Sure.
Yeah. I was just going to say the same thing. I don't see it happening that we would have several tunnels going under, because we have several projects, so of course we work together. Yeah.
Sure. Questions from the audience? All right. Contemplation mode. Let's take the first question of the Slido list. Many of the speakers, of course, reiterated the importance of Rail Baltica to Finland. So does this panel, of course. Does Finland plan to become a shareholder of the joint venture? And I will add to that, we know that the answer is quite positive, but what would be the prerequisites for that to happen, and to happen faster than later?
It's an interesting question, and for sure this is maybe the main thing that I will bring back to Helsinki when I leave this evening. And the question has popped up, but in a not very official context. So we haven't actually looked at it so thoroughly yet. So this is something we have to go back and start to do when I get back. And I think it was the Estonian Minister of Transport, I think she said earlier this morning that we'll have the 7th of May a meeting between the Prime Ministers of Finland and Estonia. And I think she said there that this is something that will probably most likely be on the agenda of that meeting. So it means that we have to work quite fast.
And just to add for your information, as many of you know, Finland is already an observer country on the supervisory board of the joint venture. And of course, the joint venture's shareholders agreement stipulates the possibility for both Finland and Poland to eventually become shareholders. Any questions from the audience? Okay, this is the 21st century. We will be in Slido mode, which is great. Finland wants to extend the TEN-T corridor to the Arctic Sea. However, Finland uses the Russian gauge railway. How shall this fit? Maybe Meelis, if you could also add to that, Sabina and
Yeah, maybe
Meelis.
the technical solutions for that, there are some.
Kari, of course.
I'm not that much in the technical side, but as I know from your study, the fixed link study, there is a issue of how to connect it, whether to use the European gauge in the tunnel towards Helsinki and have the switch there, or so. I'm not that much of a familiar there, but I think it shouldn't be the big problem because you have the gauge break also in Poland if you're coming from the eastern side, so you would need to do somewhere it anyway. Now the question is where you're going to do it. Of course, I think and it depends on the cost side as well, where it makes sense to do that. So. As I understand, once again, you should comment it, but as I understand that you haven't considered the European from Helsinki to north. So
I think this time when we have not so much traffic and we have the rail network, it's important that we have the rail network working well, and then it's in this gauge which we have now in the Finland, and I know that we can use in Finland this gauge which we have nowadays. But if I think where is the best place where we can change the gauge, I think it's where the Helsinki tunnel ends near the airport area, because there are most our cargo terminals for many owners, and it's a very important area for the Finnish cargo system, how it works.
Good. Dr. Cheng, in this regard, in Kari's presentation, several other modes of future transport were mentioned, including the Hyperloop, the maglev. Well, China has more than 30,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, which is more than twice as much as the rest of the world combined. So why is China investing in high-speed rail rather than Hyperloop or maglev, or more maglev than just the Shanghai airport connection and other ultra-fast technologies?
China is a huge country where, 10 years ago, China has no high-speed train. We have the green train, that is green-colored trains, very slow and very inconvenient. And I think from 2008, at that time, I have the speed up of China's huge investment and in this high-speed train, and as the technology introduction and huge investment, and also the leadership, have a strong leadership to promote this kind of projects. And now, so far as I know, like from Beijing, Shanghai, high-speed railway, now a little more than 4 hours, 1,200 kilometers long. So at this time, it's I think it's quite busy and much more popular for Chinese businessmen, commuters, and officials, and even for travelers and foreign visitors. And I think it's also from the perspective of investment, cost and benefit, I think it's also very good, very satisfactory. And also now to the medium term, that maybe in 10 years or 5 to 10 years, and now China has from the north to south and from the west to east, we have 4 pillar lanes. That is the crossroads. We have 4, but maybe in 10 years' time will become 8, so double. So at that time, I think China's high-speed train will be the longest in the world. And just as you mentioned that, I also took the night train from Rovaniemi to Helsinki overnight, more than 12 hours. But it's okay. It's very leisure and very comfortable. But I think it's good. It's upon your choice. Because China is so huge, and for not only for transportation, but also for economic development and social development, especially for the countryside, hinterland, not only in the eastern part, like Shanghai, Beijing, or Guangdong, Canton province, but we have huge, like Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, Tibet, and also like my hometown, like Hubei, in the central part of Yangtze River. So at this time, I think the high-speed train as a kind of driving force for social and economic development, especially for the rich and the poor. It's a kind of to narrow the gap between the rich region and the poor region. So for China, I think it will promote this also in future. This kind of projects will become one more important.
And staying on the subject of the wider economic impact that, Kari, you emphasized in your presentations, you must have analyzed other examples where a transformational transport infrastructure changes the economic geography of the regions which it connects. I mean, clearly, Tallinn and Helsinki have the potential of emulating the example of the Öresund connection and the twin cities of Malmö and Copenhagen. Do you want to expand on this subject and its wider economic impact and how it changes mobility and connectivity patterns?
Yes, we have studied this area a lot because it was very important. And if we think the situation that we have two capitals, only 80 kilometers from each other, and we are very good in digitalization and in school systems in both countries, they are very good. And I think when you have about now we are quite small capitals, but when we put each other together, we are quite big capital in this area. Not so big as St. Petersburg, but they can be very near each other, about 3 million people. And that's very important, how it makes the area more competitive to other areas.
Sabina, you want to chip in on this one?
No, it's exactly as Kari said, yes. And we have also studied it. Well, I think it's a very interesting example, as you mentioned, the Malmö-Copenhagen example, where it was very difficult also for them before building the bridge to evaluate and what would the actual impacts be. And they are far more than anybody could have expected. And I think that's something we have to look at too.
Meelis, this next one is for you, and I've been in your shoes with regard to the methodologies of these long-term economic forecasts. So the question is whether, when doing the freight assessment for the Muuga terminal and the wider context, have you analyzed development of other competing or maybe synergistic technologies such as self-driving electrified trucks and similar? Or does that stand out of the standard assessment methodology whereby you cannot assess everything or make assumptions for every development possible over the very long term?
Well, we had a separate panel on these future developments on electric trucks and everything. I would say that electric trucks is mainly a last mile thing. So if it involves a long way of traveling, then I would say that you would put these semi-trailers on rail, and then the robots or the self-driving machines would do the kind of a last mile. Because during the break, we discussed it with the Professor Hilmola from Finland, and he had the really interesting charts of how these semi-trailers traffic is going up, even not doing the up and downs, but it constantly goes up. So what's the difference of, having these congested roads, whether there's driver in or not in? Yes, of course, a computerized system could run the electric cars better than probably humans. But I would still say that if you were looking at the technology, the battery technologies and so forth, then moving these big electric trucks is a little bit problematic, and it won't take away the problem of the congestion the European roads. So I would still say that this is the last mile issue, these electric trucks, and won't affect that much of this demand. Of course, if you are jumping to the more distant future, 2045 and so on, there could be some changes in it, sure. But the next 10, 15 years, I personally do not believe on electric trucks for a longer routes.
Right. Apologies for not taking each question out of Slidos. Some of them are excellent questions, but not fully relevant to the main topic of this panel. We'll save them for future sessions, especially tomorrow. But one final question maybe from the audience, also identifying yourself and your institution. Anyone? Maybe from the back? We still hear you, we see you from up here. Okay, then one question which probably all of you could contribute, the interesting aspect of commercializing the infrastructure. And of course, we have covered a relatively wide perspective from the Estonia-Finland or Rail Baltica-Finland interface, the future fixed link, the Finnish connectivity through the Arctic, and even the northern maritime route. How do you commercialize these types of transformational mega projects? What do you do to let's say, steepen the uptake curve, to use the technical jargon? The Muuga study is a bit more ambitious than the EY CBA done for the Rail Baltica, but that also involves making assumptions, maybe more optimistic assumptions. But generally, and in light of these wider economic benefits, what do you do to promote? It's not just about the physical infrastructure, is it?
It's very important that cities think in the future how they make the city plans and how the people will move there. It's not only infrastructure priority. Very important is the operation and the land use plans in the cities, how they work.
Sabina?
Yes, that's one point. And we are looking a lot at different financing models, of course. And there comes also for example, what's the benefit for the cities, for example, with the land owners and so forth. Is this something we can work on? I have to admit, actually say it here in public, that I think that in Finland, we're not very good at this. It's something we've just started to study, and I know that several countries and member states in Europe that are far better at this than we are. So we are looking quite a lot of our member states here, other member states here. We're not very good in this. So I don't think I should.
So there's always room for improvement, even for Finland. Meelis?
Well, I would say that the promoters of, for example, of the Muuga project are private companies, because the Muuga is a landlord-operated port, meaning that the terminal operators are private entities. So, and in that particular situation, what you would like to do is to give as many access to these companies, and these companies, or let's say the market, will follow, and they will promote their connections. As I said during my presentation, it was kind of interesting to see that the CEO of a big company where they have warehouses like in 60, 70 different countries was optimistic about this connection, even without the facts, without the price of the connection, without the timetable and so forth. And this is a thing that has been widely criticized. Where are the facts, how much does it cost, and so forth. So they had this strategic thinking that if there is this railway connection, it's a missing link for this perfect intermodality in Muuga. So they are promoting it already. So they are knowing now that it's coming, and they are doing a good job for it.
Excellent. And Dr. Cheng?
Yeah. From today's presentations and sessions, I learned that the EU funding are essential for Baltic Railway and also some serious projects. And I think that the cohesion fund and the regional development funds, this kind of funding from the EU are essential for the regional development, and especially for the peripheral, like the high north, and for some not so highly developed part of the Nordic or Baltic states. And through this kind of infrastructure, railway, and highway, and like port and the facilities structure, and how to promote the social and development, especially from the EU. And just as I mentioned, China also has encountered this kind of problems. Maybe in future, this kind of experience sharing and mutual learning also is quite good. With Finnish, with Estonian friends, I think we have more to communicate on these aspects in future. Thank you.
Right, and that concludes the panel. Round of applause to our panelists.